My son wanted to get rid of me. I didn't argue. I sold the house he thought was his for $890,000. He came back from a business trip, smiling, until the key didn't fit. On the doorstep, he found a note. When he read it, he started screaming. But before that final scream, there was silence. It began on a Tuesday evening while I scraped cold meatloaf into the trash. The silence of the house usually comforted me, but tonight it felt heavy, pressing against the windows like a physical weight. I wiped the granite counter, a surface I installed 20 years ago. Martha's photo watched me from the mantel, eyes still full of laughter. When the phone rang, the harsh trill shattered the quiet. I saw the caller ID and forced a smile I didn't feel. It was Lucas. My only son. I cleared my throat, desperate to sound capable, not like the widower fading into the wallpaper. I pressed the green button, hoping for connection but expecting only obligation. Hey Dad, just checking in, Lucas said. I heard clinking silverware in the background. How are you holding up? Emily chimed in, her tone dripping with a sweetness she reserved for children. They talked about the Phoenix conference and the heat. I nodded along, offering short answers, unwilling to burden them with my solitude. I told them I was fine. I told them I was eating well. I lied to protect them from my grief, unaware they were lying to protect their greed. We love you, Gordon. Get some rest, Emily said. I said my goodbyes and waited for the click. I heard the rustle of fabric, the muffled thump of a phone sliding into a pocket. But the line didn't go dead. The connection remained open, a digital window into their real lives. I reached for the disconnect button. My finger hovered over the red icon. Then I heard Lucas laugh. It wasn't the polite chuckle he gave me. It was cold, sharp, and utterly cruel. God, that took forever? Lucas groaned. He's so rambling these days. It's pathetic. My hand froze. The blood in my veins turned to ice. We have to move fast, Emily replied, her voice stripped of warmth. The facility in Arvada has a bed opening next month. Once he's in there, we can list the house immediately. I stared at the phone, unable to breathe. They weren't in Phoenix. The ambient noise was a restaurant. They were planning my disposal over appetizers. He won't fight us, Lucas said. He's too lonely. He'll do whatever we say if we frame it as a vacation. The words hit harder than any physical blow. They didn't see a father, they saw an obstacle. They saw an asset to be liquidated. I lowered the phone to the counter, leaving the line open. I looked at Martha's picture again. I wasn't the confused old man they thought I was. I was an engineer, and I was about to dismantle their entire world. I stood over the phone before finally pressing the red button. The silence returned, feeling like a countdown. My hands trembled, not from age, but from a rage so cold it burned. I walked to the hallway, past the grandfather clock Martha loved. It ticked rhythmically, marking time I didn't know I was losing. I entered my study and locked the heavy oak door. I had trusted Lucas. I paid his tuition. I co-signed his loans. Now, I needed to see exactly what those loans had become. I pulled the heavy steel drawer of my filing cabinet open. It groaned on its tracks. Inside lay years of financial records I had ignored since the funeral. I found a folder marked Lucas Business. The truth was ugly. Bank notices, unopened, and shoved to the back. The business loan I co-signed 3 years ago was in default. He hadn't made a payment in 6 months. He wasn't just struggling, he was drowning. And I was the life raft he planned to tear apart for scrap. I sat at my mahogany desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room. I typed, Arvada Care Facility, into the search bar. Emily had called it a resort. Images showed gray linoleum floors and shared rooms with hospital curtains. It was a warehouse for the forgotten, a place to store a problem until it expired. I printed the page, the whir of the machine sounding like a judgment. They didn't want me safe. They wanted me cheap. Sleep was impossible. I spent the nights staring at the ceiling, mapping out the architecture of their betrayal. At 8 in the morning, the phone rang again. It was Emily. Her voice was bright, chipper, entirely fake. "Good morning, Dad." "Did you sleep well?" she asked. I cleared my throat, pitching my voice to sound frail. "A bit confused, dear," I said. "I forgot to turn off the porch light again. It was a test." I needed to see how eager she was to confirm my incompetence. That's okay, Gordon, she cooed, seizing the bait immediately. You know, Lucas and I were thinking, when we get back, maybe we should look at some living arrangements that are easier for you. She didn't wait. We'll be home in 8 days. We can handle everything then. 8 days. That was the deadline. They had a schedule for my eviction. I gripped the phone tight enough to whiten my knuckles. That sounds lovely. I lied, my voice steady. I just want to be taken care of. We will take care of everything, she promised, sealing her own fate. I hung up the phone. The morning sun hit the dust motes in the air. I looked at the printed brochure of the nursing home, then at the deed to my house framed on the wall. My name was the only one on it. I had 8 days. I didn't need a nurse. I needed a lawyer, a realtor, and a dumpster. The grieving widower died last night. The engineer had work to do. I parked my sedan outside the brick building where Henderson had practiced law since the Reagan administration. The air inside the office smelled of old paper and lemon polish. A scent that reminded me of simpler times. Henderson, a man whose eyebrows had gone rogue years ago, peered at me over his spectacles. "This is sudden, Gordon," he rumbled, leaning back. "You and Martha built that place to last forever." I placed the deed on his desk. "Forever ended last night, Arthur." Henderson reviewed the documents with agonizing slowness. His pen hovering over the fine print. He tapped a finger on the signature line, confirming what I desperately needed to hear. "It is all yours. Fee simple. Lucas has no claim until you are in the ground." I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction settle in my chest. "And the power of attorney draft I sent over last month?" I asked. Henderson pulled a file from his stack. "Not executed yet." I took the papers. I shredded the unassigned power of attorney right there in his office. The sound of tearing paper was the first real music I had heard all day. Back in the car, I dialed the number for Apex Realty. We buy fast. It felt dirty, like calling a bail bondsman, but I didn't have the luxury of pride. A man named Silas answered on the first ring. His voice was smooth, polished like a river stone. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "are you prepared for a discount?" Silas arrived at the house at 2 sharp, driving a black German car that cost more than my first 3 salaries combined. He stepped onto the driveway expecting a desperate old man living in squalor. I saw the judgment in his eyes as he scanned the lawn. But when I opened the front door, his expression shifted. The entryway wasn't cluttered with age. It was a cathedral of oak and light. "I had refinished these floors myself last summer." He stopped, his shoes squeaking. I led him to the sunroom I had built for Martha when her arthritis got bad. It was insulated with heated floors and custom joinery that hid every screw head. Silas ran a hand along the molding, his calculator forgotten in his pocket. He wasn't looking at a teardown anymore, he was looking at a masterpiece. "This is not standard construction," he murmured, pulling out a laser measure. "I over-engineered it," I said flatly. "It was built to keep someone safe." Silas tapped numbers into his tablet, his demeanor entirely changed. The shark had smelled blood, but now he realized he was dealing with a whale. "Usually for a 5-day close, we offer 60% of market," he said, watching my face closely. "But this condition is immaculate." He hesitated, calculating his margin. "I have a group of investors looking for high-end rentals. They want turnkey properties." I crossed my arms and waited. "I know what Zillow says, Silas. Give me the number." He looked at the custom fireplace and then back at me, doing the math one last time. 890,000. Cash. The number hung in the air, heavy and absolute. It was exactly what Lucas had speculated about on the phone, but he would never touch a cent of it. "And the timeline?" I asked. "We can close in 5 days. But the investors want it vacant, completely empty." I looked at 30 years of furniture. "Done?" I said. "Bring the papers." I returned from the hardware store with 50 flat cardboard boxes and 3 rolls of heavy-duty tape. Stacked in the foyer, they looked like the ramparts of a fortress I was preparing to abandon. The house felt different now, knowing it was legally promised to another. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just volume and mass waiting to be displaced. I started in the master bedroom, the hardest room. Martha's scent still clung to the curtains, a faint ghost of lavender and dust. I taped the first box shut. I didn't pack her clothes. Those went into black garbage bags for donation, a final charity she would have insisted on. But her jewelry box, the small cedar one with the inlaid pearl, went into my carry-on suitcase. I wrapped her favorite ceramic mug in bubble wrap as if it were a holy relic. These were the emotional anchors I would drag to my new life. The rest was just scenery. I worked through the night, the sound of tearing tape replacing the grandfather clock's steady rhythm. By dawn, I had reached the basement. This was Lucas's territory. For years, he and Emily had treated my home as their free storage unit. I stared at the mountain of plastic bins labeled Ski Gear and Lucas Miss. There were golf clubs he hadn't touched in 5 years and a Nordic track that gathered only dust. I didn't open a single bin. I didn't check for valuables. I simply dragged them to the center of the room. They were heavy with entitlement. I called a junk removal service at 8 in the morning. Everything in the basement goes, I told the dispatcher. I don't care where. When the crew arrived, 2 burly men with tattoos on their necks, they looked at the pristine condition of the items. You sure, boss? One asked, pointing at a nearly new set of tires. Con, it's all trash, I said, my voice flat. Take it all. Watching them haul away Lucas's neglected possessions felt like surgery without anesthesia. It hurt, but it was necessary. Con, as the basement cleared, a loose paper fluttered from a tipped box. I picked it up. It was a crayon drawing on yellowed construction paper. A stick figure with a lopsided smile holding a wrench, captioned, "Best dad ever," in childish scrawl. Lucas had drawn it when he was 6, back when his love was simple and free. I held it for a long minute, remembering the boy who used to run to the door when I came home. That boy was dead. The man currently in Phoenix plotting to steal my savings was a stranger wearing my son's face. I didn't fold the drawing. I didn't save it for a scrapbook. I walked to the kitchen trash can and dropped it on top of the coffee grounds and eggshells. It landed face up, the crayon smile mocking me from the refuse. Goodbye. Lucas, I whispered. I tied the bag shut, knotting the plastic tight, sealing the memory inside with the garbage where it belonged. 5 days later, the house was a hollow shell. The floors I had sanded gleamed under the afternoon sun, unburdened by rugs or furniture. The silence was absolute now, echoing my footsteps as I did a final walkthrough. Silas met me at the door with a mobile notary. I signed the papers on the kitchen island, the only surface left. Funds will hit your account tomorrow, Silas said, handing me a copy. Con. I handed him the keys. I didn't look back. I drove my sedan across town, putting miles of asphalt between me and the tree-lined streets of my past. The destination was the pinnacle, Con, a fortress of glass and steel rising above the city. It looked more like a hotel for diplomats than a retirement home. I pulled up to the gatehouse where a guard checked my ID against a digital roster. "Welcome home, Mr. Hayes," he said. The heavy gate swung open. It felt less like moving in and more like entering witness protection. My unit was on the 12th floor, facing west toward the mountains. The air inside was cool and smelled of nothing, a blessed relief from the lavender ghosts of Maple Street. I set Martha's jewelry box on the quartz nightstand, the first claim on this neutral territory. The furniture was rented, sleek and modern, providing function without history. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the city. From this height, the people below looked like ants. Small, Con, insignificant, and unable to hurt me. The next morning, I walked into the main branch of First National. I bypassed the teller line for the wealth management division on the top floor. Con, the account manager, a woman named Sarah with sharp eyes, reviewed the wire transfer from the title company. $890,000. It was a number that looked abstract on the screen. "We need strict access protocols," I told her. "No authorized users, no family access, in-person verification only." Sarah nodded, typing rapidly on her keyboard. "Consider it ironclad, Mr. Hayes." I sat in the plush leather chair while Sarah worked. Lucas knew my old bank. He knew my mother's maiden name and the name of my first pet. He could have social engineered his way into my old savings with a single weeping phone call. But this account was a black box. "I want a cashier's check for $40,000, I said. Sarah paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. For a vehicle, she asked politely. For rent, I replied. I am paying my lease a year in advance. With my future secured, I drove back to the house one last time. I still had the garage code, con, and the new owners wouldn't take possession for another week. The emptiness of the foyer amplified the sound of my breathing. I wasn't here for nostalgia. I pulled 3 small black boxes from my bag. Wi-Fi cameras, battery operated and magnetic. I stood on a step stool and tucked the first one above the doorframe. Hidden in the shadow of the crown molding, it pointed directly at the front door. I placed the second camera in the kitchen, facing the window Lucas had broken into when he was 16. He was a creature of habit. If the door failed, he would try the window. I hid the third camera in the porch eaves to cover the main entrance. I pulled out my tablet and synced the devices. The feed flickered to life, showing the empty hallway in crisp high definition. It was a digital window into the past I had just vacated. I adjusted the angle slightly, ensuring the frame captured the entire entryway. The trap was set. It was perfect. I left the house through the garage, resetting the keypad code to a random string of numbers I wouldn't remember. Backing my car out of the driveway, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. "Can't wait to see you. We have a big surprise for dinner." I looked at the dark house, then down at the glowing message. "I have a surprise too." I whispered to the empty cabin. I didn't reply. I just drove away, leaving the digital eyes watching the silence. I met Mike the locksmith at the house at noon sharp. He was a man of few words, carrying a toolbox that rattled like a bag of loose bones. "You want them all changed?" he asked, eyeing the solid oak door I had varnished myself. "Every single one," I confirmed. "Deadbolts, too." He nodded and went to work. The sound of his drill biting into the brass cylinder felt violent, a necessary destruction. Metal shavings fell onto the porch I had swept for 30 years. With every old lock that hit the floor, I felt a heavy chain loosening around my chest. Mike installed heavy-duty commercial cylinders, the kind used for jewelry stores and warehouses. They were silver, cold, and utterly unforgiving. I watched him test the mechanism, the bolt sliding home with a solid metallic thud that echoed in the empty foyer. It was the sound of a bank vault closing. "These pick-proof?" I asked. Mike wiped grease from his hands with a rag. "Nothing is impossible, but these will take a drill and an hour of noise to bypass." I took the new keys. They felt jagged and foreign in my hand, tools of exclusion rather than access. I walked to the side of the garage where the realtor's lockbox hung like a gray tumor. I punched in the code Salas had given me and placed one set of the new keys inside. The metal door snapped shut, sealing my ownership inside. The house was now technically a fortress waiting for its new commander. I kept the other set in my pocket, a temporary bridge between my past and their impending disaster. The house stood silent behind me, stripped of furniture and ghosts, waiting for the actors to arrive for the final scene. I sat on the front steps, the stone cold against my trousers, and pulled a notepad from my jacket. I had rehearsed the words 1,000 times in the dark, but writing them in ink felt permanent. I didn't want a manifesto. I wanted a mirror. Lucas and Emily, I wrote, my hand steady as a surgeon's. I heard the phone call. I heard the laughter. The house is sold. The money is gone. I folded the paper once. It was light as a feather, but carried the weight of a 30-year relationship ending. I slipped it into a crisp, white envelope. I used blue painter's tape to secure the envelope to the front door at eye level. It hung there, stark white against the dark, stained wood, impossible to miss. It looked like a summons, a judgment delivered from on high. I stepped back to the driveway to admire the placement. It was the only decoration left in the entire property. A gentle breeze caught the corner of the envelope, making it flutter like a dying moth. I checked the hidden camera feed on my phone one last time. The note was perfectly centered. The drive to the pinnacle felt like escaping a crime scene before the sirens arrived. Traffic was heavy on Interstate 25, a river of red taillights flowing toward the city. I merged into the lane, just another anonymous driver in a sea of steel. But unlike them, I wasn't going home to a family dinner. I was retreating to a bunker. Con. My heart rate slowed with every mile marker I passed. The distance wasn't just physical, it was a necessary quarantine. I parked in the underground garage, my tires squealing on the polished concrete. Inside my apartment, the air was still and cool. I walked to the kitchenette and uncorked the bottle of Cabernet I had saved from the cellar. It was the vintage Martha, and I drank on our anniversary. I poured a generous glass, the dark red liquid swirling against the crystal. I set up my tablet on the coffee table, propping it against a stack of books. The screen was a black mirror until I tapped the icon. The feed sprang to life, broadcasting the silent, grainy image of my former front porch. I sat in the leather armchair, watching the digital feed like a hawk hunting from a wire. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows across the driveway I used to shovel. On the screen, the white envelope was a beacon in the gathering gloom. The motion sensor sensitivity was set to high. I took a sip of wine, the tannins drying my tongue. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I was simply waiting for the inevitable collision between their fantasy and my reality. The clock on the wall ticked. My phone buzzed on the armrest, vibrating like an angry hornet. The screen lit up with a notification from Lucas. "Almost there, Dad! Can't wait to see you!" The exclamation points felt like daggers wrapped in wool. He was texting the man he thought was a senile victim, Con, not the man watching him from a high-rise fortress. I looked at the tablet. The driveway on the screen was empty, a stage waiting for the villains. I didn't reply to the text. I just leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen, and waited for the show to begin. The sun had vanished, leaving the driveway bathed in the harsh artificial glow of the motion sensor floodlights. My tablet screen flared white as the familiar black SUV turned off the street. Con. It moved with aggressive speed, braking hard enough to dip the nose before settling near the garage. I leaned closer to the glass, swirling the wine in my hand. They were here. The unwitting actors had finally taken their marks on the stage I had prepared. The engine cut off, plunging the yard back into silence, but the air felt charged with static. Lucas stepped out first, stretching his back as if he had just conquered a marathon rather than a 4-hour drive. He looked at the house with a proprietary gaze, scanning the roofline and the windows. Emily emerged from the passenger side, already tapping on her phone, likely checking Zillow estimates again. Con. They dragged 2 large suitcases from the trunk, the wheels rumbling loudly over the concrete. They didn't look like guests visiting a father. They looked like landlords arriving to inspect an acquisition. The arrogance in their posture was palpable. They walked up the path to the front porch, chatting about renovations. Con. I heard Emily's voice tinny but clear through the tablet speaker. "We should knock out that kitchen wall immediately," she said. Lucas laughed, Con digging into his pocket for the spare key I had given him years ago. He stepped up to the door, bypassing the doorbell, and slid the key into the lock. Or tried to. The key jammed halfway. He frowned, jiggling it violently. "Wrong key," Emily asked. "No, it's the right one," Lucas muttered, shoving it harder. The mechanism refused to yield. The high, security cylinder mocked his familiar, worn-down brass key. Lucas grunted, twisting with enough force to nearly snap the metal, but the bolt remained solid. "It won't turn," he said, his voice rising in pitch. He stepped back, looking at the door handle as if it had personally insulted him. Emily pushed past him, trying the handle herself, rattling it aggressively. "Did he change the locks?" she whispered, the first note of genuine fear creeping into her tone. "Why would he do that?" Lucas pounded on the door with the flat of his fist. "Dad, open up." "It's us!" he shouted. The sound distorted on my tablet, turning into a digital bark. There was no answer, only the echo of his fist against the oak. That was when Emily saw it. She pointed a manicured finger at the white envelope, taped at eye level, fluttering slightly in the night breeze. "What is that?" she asked. Lucas ripped the envelope from the wood, the blue tape tearing away with a sharp zip. He tore the paper open, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. Emily crowded his shoulder, using her phone flashlight to illuminate the handwritten script. I watched their faces in the blue, white glow of the LED. Their eyes scanned the lines I had written. I saw the moment comprehension hit them. It wasn't a slow dawn. It was a lightning strike. Lucas's mouth fell open. Emily gasped, a hand flying to her mouth to stifle a noise that escaped anyway. They read the part about the phone call. They read the price. Lucas dropped the note as if it were burning coal. He stared at the closed door, his face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Then it happened. He threw his head back and screamed. It wasn't a cry of grief or worry. It was a primal guttural roar of frustration. He sold it. He sold the damn house. Lucas kicked one of the suitcases, sending it skidding across the porch. $890,000? He shrieked. He took it all? The mask of the loving son had disintegrated completely. Emily didn't comfort him. She turned on him like a viper. You said he was senile, she hissed, shoving his chest. You said he would sign whatever we put in front of him? Lucas stumbled back, looking wild-eyed. He was supposed to be. He yelled back. Con, you're the one who pushed for the nursing home! Emily grabbed his lapels, shaking him. We put a deposit on the Boulder house. Lucas! Non-refundable! $50,000 we don't have! The financial secret spilled out ugly and desperate on the porch. I can't cover that check! Lucas screamed, his voice cracking. I haven't had a paycheck in 6 months. The revelation hung in the air, silencing Emily instantly. She stared at him, her hands dropping from his jacket. 6 months, she whispered. The betrayal mirroring the one they had planned for me. You told me you were consulting. Lucas ran his hands through his hair, pacing the small porch like a caged animal. I needed the house money to fix it. He sobbed. It was the only way out. I reached out and tapped the screen, cutting the audio. I didn't need to hear the rest. Con. Watching them tear each other apart in silence was enough. They were stranded on a dark porch, locked out of the past and bankrupt in the future. I took a slow sip of the Cabernet. It tasted rich and complex, with notes of dark fruit and justice. I closed the heavy leather cover of my tablet, extinguishing their panic. The screen went black. I was finally alone, and for the first time in years, I was safe. The silence of my new life was broken only by the scheduled updates from Henderson. For the first week, Lucas tried everything short of a battering ram to reach me. He called the police for welfare checks, claiming I was suffering from acute dementia. He even hired a cheap lawyer to contest the house sale. But Henderson's paperwork was a fortress of steel and ink. Every inquiry met a stone wall. The police officer who visited me simply drank a cup of coffee, verified my sanity, and left. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. Instead, I started walking to the community center down the block. I joined a woodworking club on Tuesdays. The smell of sawdust was different here. It wasn't about repairing a decaying home, but creating something new. I met a man named Arthur who argued with me about baseball and a woman named Clara who laughed at my dry jokes. They didn't know my bank balance. They didn't care about my real estate. They just saw Gordon. The grapevine is a powerful thing, even across town. I heard, through a mutual friend, that Lucas and Emily are living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment near the highway. The deposit on the Boulder house is gone, swallowed by their own hubris. I suspect their marriage is dissolving just as quickly as their finances. I felt a phantom ache in my chest when I heard the news, the ghost of a father's instinct. But I didn't reach for the checkbook. I let the ache pass. For years, I believed the lie that my value was tied to my utility. I thought if I stopped fixing things, stopped paying for things, I would cease to matter. I believed I was a burden waiting to be offloaded. Standing on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the Rockies purple, I finally understood the truth. I wasn't the burden. I was the foundation they had rested on for too long. Removing myself didn't break me, It forced them to finally learn how to stand. A letter arrived this morning with no return address, but I recognized the jagged handwriting immediately. It sat on my quartz counter for an hour, a white square of potential guilt. I didn't open it. I didn't need to read the excuses or the pleas for a temporary loan to get back on their feet. The time for negotiation had expired on that front porch. I dropped the envelope into the shredder. The machine whirred, slicing the last thread of manipulation into confetti. It was done. I opened my laptop, but not to check bank accounts or security cameras. I navigated to a travel site and typed, Florence. Into the destination bar. Martha had always talked about the Tuscan light, but we never went. We were always saving for Lucas for the house, for a rainy day. It was raining now, and I had the umbrella. I booked a first-class ticket for one. Con. I wasn't running away from my past anymore. I was flying toward a future that finally belonged to me.